Hi, I'm Mandi Gross. I'm a patient family partner from Mama's Voices, and I'm also the administrative coordinator for Mama's Voices, where we have a passion for getting the patient voice out into the world to help future moms and babies have the healthiest pregnancies and deliveries possible. I'm here to share my story today. About postpartum preeclampsia. I wanted to first thank you all for listening to the patient voice and valuing it. It's so important, and hopefully we can help so many people with the stories. So about 9 years ago, 7 days after I delivered my daughter, I woke up with the worst headache of my life in the middle of the night. We called someone to watch the baby, and my husband took me to the closest ER, which was a standalone ER very close to my home. When we got there, my blood pressure was elevated. I was hyperreflexive. I, of course, had the worst headache, and my legs were swollen. I was 7 days postpartum, but still spent hours in the ER while they conducted CAT scans and ran test after test, consulted other hospitals. My head was still in very much pain, and my blood pressure was going up continually through this process. Eventually, I was transferred to a full service hospital labor and delivery ward near the standalone ER. That was not where I delivered, and my doctors did not have privileges there. So I was given to the on-call person on the floor that night, and she became my doctor, but she didn't know any of my history and was not following me through the pregnancy. It was just location-wise much closer, which I didn't even know why it needed to be so emergent, because nobody told us that it was an emergency situation. In fact, the ambulance that took me there from the ER, we asked if we'd be going with the lights on and fast, and they said not unless she tries something, but that was all that they said, and it sounded like a joke. We didn't know the gravity of the situation until much later. Additionally, the ambulance drivers were not told about my postpartum status and that I had a C-section. So when they moved me from the bed to the gurney, it pulled on the stitches and it was very painful. So if they had been briefed, that could have been avoided. I ended up in that hospital, as I said, on a magnesium IV, but I was not given any blood pressure medication. I just remember being almost paralyzed from the magnesium. Eventually, my blood pressure stabilized enough that they sent me home, but not before coming to my room and telling me that in all of the testing that they were doing, had discovered a pituitary cyst. This was the middle of the night that someone came by to tell me this, and did not give any follow-up information or provide time for questions. They only said, you have a cyst on your pituitary, someone will be in to talk to you tomorrow. So I remember crying and calling my best friend, whose husband is a neurologist, and told him about it and asked him what to do. He asked me what I was even in the hospital for, and I said, a preeclampsia, and he said, is it preeclampsia or eclampsia? And I remember saying, well, I already had the baby, so it has to be eclampsia. And he responded that that's not how that works. So I was very uninformed and very scared. So then they sent me home, and a day later, my blood pressure skyrocketed again. The headache came back, and we were back to that hospital's ER, where I was put on more magnesium, and this time discharged with blood pressure medication and discharge papers that said postpartum preeclampsia delivery is the cure, which it obviously wasn't, because I had already delivered. So that ordeal resulted in postpartum anxiety, postpartum depression, and PTSD for hospitals and needing them. And now I don't like to be too far from a hospital, because I was so uninformed and unaware of what could happen. You never know when you're going to need it. So my takeaways from the story, and thank you again for listening to it, is to please inform the patient, the care people, and the transfer facilities, including ambulances, about what's happening. We should all know what is going on, and I shouldn't have to know a neurologist to be able to ask my questions. Not everyone has medical knowledge. Most people don't. So anything given should be pretty explanatory and relevant to the situation, and not talking about delivery if you're for a postpartum event. Also follow up with places like the standalone ER. Subsequently, I was there for an unrelated reason years later, and I was talking about the last time I was in there, and they remembered me and they said, "What happened to you? What was that?" So no one had told them. So if someone came in with a similar situation, they wouldn't have known. But if there was some follow up, then maybe they would have known what to do with the next patient. And also, patient surveys are super important, both written and digital. Not everyone has a phone to take them. And some people, if you expect to be mailed back, provide postage is always a helpful thing. Things as simple as a questionnaire about signage, like when you get to the hospital, do you know where to go? What could hospitals do to hear the patient voice? You can provide a list of resources to families after a severe event so that they can get help or resources. Phone follow-ups are a great resource because you can talk to a person and explain your experience, good, bad. A printed survey with, again, the prepaid postage, or a digital survey, even a QR code in the room, an email, a tablet while you're still there would be a great way to get a digital survey. A peer support group, especially for NICU parents. The facilitator could be a chaplain or a social services ambassador, or whoever you already have on staff. It also would provide community building for future initiatives. If you have a support group, then you can ask those parents and care people for their input into future events. Transfer packages. If you're going to be transferred from an ER to a hospital facility, a transfer package would have been nice so that there was communication between the ambulance, the hospital, and the ER. Bring in families to share their stories and rounds, or affiliated medical school classes would be helpful. Different families have different perspectives, different cultures and backgrounds, and all of those stories could be helpful. Establish a women's services patient advisory council, or incorporate birthing families into the hospital-wide one if you already have one that exists. Bring families to serve on an expert team or a PQC if you have one working with you, or you can even invite patients to make videos of their experience, like this one, that can be used as a training tool for providers in the future. So thank you all. I know I gave you a lot of information, but thank you so much for valuing the patient voice and for listening.